Hey, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Lyme Insider Podcast. Today, if you want to learn about how to use botanical medicines, otherwise known as herbs, to most of us, and to really kind of jumpstart your healing. And really, it's one of these things that, to me, supercharges getting to the end result of recovering your health, because these botanicals are things that can address Lyme and other co-infections in ways that our medications just can't. And so we're really lucky today. We're being joined by Dr. Myriah Hinchey, who's a naturopathic physician practicing in Connecticut, really great friend of mine and my family. And we've worked together and studied together and lectured all over the world together. And one of the coolest parts is she is the founder of Tau Vitality in Hebron, Connecticut. She is also the co-founder and owner of Lyme Botanicals, which is one of the premier botanical lines in the world, and the one that we use almost exclusively in our practice, and also the host and founder of the Lyme Bytes Symposium. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things today, but Dr. Myriah Hinchey, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to finally be here with you.
I know, right? It's like we do everything else for everybody else, and finally we're getting to, do something for our own audiences and stuff. And, one of the things I wanted to really talk about, and it's like, is botanicals, to me, in the last 5 or 6 years have really gotten a big boost in how we know where they work, and how to utilize them better than we've ever known before. I feel like prior to that, it was like sort of like traditional knowledge and like kind of all the herbalists and the naturopaths like working out in the community, figuring this stuff out. But now we actually have evidence behind it. And I think that that's one of the things I've always really appreciated about your approach to medicine is it's not just, hey, let's do natural because it's not medicine, like a medication, a prescription medicine, but it's more that it's, there's real science behind this stuff. And so I know that we were talking before we hit record, like we really want to dive deeply into all of that, not only the evidence of like what's out there, but how to utilize this. But I mean, I always love to, rewind a little bit and hear a bit about what got you in the natural medicine and got you on this path of looking at herbals and botanicals as sort of this core, focus for human healing.
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a long story. So for the sake of time, I'll do the Cliff Notes version. I wanted to be a health teacher. That is literally what I wanted to do when I first went off for undergrad. But I wasn't exactly sure. So I just was doing general studies. And then I was at the University of Connecticut and got interested in physical therapy. The quick version of this is my grandfather had a stroke. He was paralyzed. He wasn't getting physical therapy benefits. So my grandmother, my aunt, my mother, and myself would take turns going in and doing physical therapy with him in his nursing home, which was not far from UConn at all. And I developed kind of like a love for physical therapy. And so the program at UConn was very competitive. One of their, you got points. It was kind of like the point system on the application. So you got X amount of points if you actually had experience working in a physical therapy office. And so there was a physical therapy office down the road that was looking for a receptionist. I got that job, quickly moved up to being a physical therapy aide, and they had licensed massage therapists there. And I fell in love with massage therapy. And also, part of the application process, you had to sign something saying, you wouldn't work, like you needed to be a full-time student. You weren't allowed to work during this program. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like I could do 1 or 2 massages and make enough money to pay for myself to live, like 1 or 2 massages per week, make enough money to live and pay my expenses. And I thought it would just make me that much better of a physical therapist, because back then, God, like 30 years ago, physical therapy for real.
We're
Physical
dating
therapy,
ourselves a little bit today.
I know. Physical therapy was hands-on, it was craniosacral and it was massage therapy, and it wasn't, running these little exercise rings, that today's physical therapy has turned into. But anyways, I digress. So I left and went to school for massage therapy. And while I was in school for massage therapy, I really became fascinated in herbal medicine and in Chinese medicine and in acupressure and Jin Shin Do. And then the whole philosophy of Eastern medicine, preventing and using nature to cure and bringing things back into balance versus Western medicine, which is really, trying to fix something after it's already broken, and really in a system that even back then was really focused on symptom management.
Right.
So, while we were in massage therapy school, we also learned a lot about the mind body connection. And I decided that I wanted to develop a therapy that was a combination of releasing cellular memories through a hand on approach for healing, but also incorporate psychotherapy into it, along with herbs and acupuncture and everything else. And so, this does not seem like a short story, Tom. So I go back
I
to
feel like I'm
UConn,
telling this story.
right? So I go back to UConn to finish my undergraduate degree, now in psychology, not in physical therapy. I never ended up applying. And I was working in a day spa down the road, and this woman came in for a massage, and she was telling me she was so stressed out about finals. And I was like, "Oh, what are you in school for?" And she said, "A naturopathic doctor." And I was like, "Well, what's that?" I had no idea.
Oh,
And she said, "Well, we do massage therapy, we do psychotherapy, we do nutrition, we do herbs, we do acupuncture." And I was like, "Wait, I'm sorry, what?" Because the part of the story I left out was like, I wanted to get my master's in nutrition, my acupuncture license. I wanted to be, I wanted a license to do psychotherapy. And it's like I would have been in school for like 20 more years. So when I
mhm.
found out that this one medical degree existed in a 4-year like postgraduate, I was like, I literally left work that day and I was like, I'm going to be a naturopathic doctor. And,
Nice.
I am.
Wow. Well, it's interesting because it's like part of that your journey of exploration. I remember getting into medicine, going, "Hey, I've been in emergency medicine forever, but there's just something else that I'm looking for." And in the beginning, it was like, "All right, I'm really interested in the body and healing," but I didn't know about all these things. And then I applied to medical schools based on location because I just knew MDs and DOs were kind of the same, more or less, but all the DOs that I had met were like way better doctors, and they were way cooler, and they were doing like cranial sacral work. And you're like, "Oh, it's all this." And then as I started to learn, I was like, "Oh, wait, there's stuff out there that I never even knew about." And then as I went through medical school and residency, I'm like, um, I thought I was going to go to residency, learn more about how we ruin the human body, and then have to go create a new field of medicine about supporting self healing because no one really does it. Then it turns out there's like actual real osteopaths. Then I learned about naturopaths and I learned about all this nutrition. Like, there's just no one had told us. So it's really interesting as you learn more, life kind of gives you the opportunity to learn and grow and let go of some of the old stuff, which is part of what we always talk about with healing, letting go of the old and moving into the new. So then what, I mean, that's really cool. I'm glad that we got a chance to talk about it because I didn't know that. I mean, we've known each other for probably close to 15 years now, at least. And but when you look at how you got into like looking at Lyme disease, I mean, there's the obvious, you're in Connecticut. So, I mean, that doesn't hurt because everybody seems to have high exposure risk. But what got you kind of going down the road from just like, I'm assuming you started with general naturopathy and then moved into more of a specialty approach to Lyme disease, although I could be completely wrong.
No, so honestly, I started out with, I wanted to be an anti-aging medicine. That was coming out of school what I wanted to do. And then somewhere along the line, I got kind of taken down the path of autism spectrum disorder. And this
Mm-hmm.
was like as I was just getting out of school, and it really like captured my heart. And so then I did my mentorship with Dr. Nancy O'Hara and became a certified DAN practitioner within, I'm going to say, like the first year or maybe two of graduating. And so I was in pretty much just like general family medicine was what I was doing. And I guess I skip over an important part. I did have a patient when I was in clinic who had both Borrelia and Babesia and had failed conventional treatment, was on IV Rocephin for, I think, like 6 months or so, and was not any better. And so, in the roughly 9 months to a year that I was working with her, she said that she had felt better than she had felt since she became sick. And we had
Nice.
used hydrotherapy, peat baths, so we were doing like a hyperthermia sort of bath, a lot of detox, a lot of nutrition, and a lot of Chinese medicine herbs, of which I still use now. So, I kind of had that exposure right in school that Lyme is not what we're taught it is. And
Mm,
that, someone can be on pretty aggressive antibiotics for a significant period of time and not be cured, as we're all taught. Then fast forward a couple years in, when I met you, I was at actually a Connecticut Naturopathic Association meeting
right.
where the focus was actually on Lyme disease. And learning everything that I learned right there, really changed, I would say, my life and my sort of like my not so much like my approach to treating patients, but I'm going to say like my approach to working up a really good differential diagnosis, right? Because once you understand that Lyme infects every cell in the body and affects every cell, every organ system, every system of the body, you really have to have these things in your differential, no matter what specialty or what part of the body you're looking at.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I remember really clearly. I was lecturing up in mid-state Maine at one point at a conference for, it was kind of a combo practitioner evening training for like half a night, like started late afternoon into the late wee evening hours. And the next day was like a public forum. And one of the docs who brought us up came and said, you know so much. And I'm like, not really. I just know a bunch about what I do every day. He's like, no, no, no. Like, literally, like, you talk about all of Lyme and borreliosis and tick-borne illnesses, and you talk about all the other vector-borne illnesses, and you talk about mycoplasma and chlamydia and strep and pandas and autism and heavy metal toxicity and mold illness. And it's like, and he just keeps going. He goes, you're literally like 16 different specialties. I'm like, yeah, I guess so. But I mean, we treat real human beings and their body, and they're not systematized, right? It's like, obviously, we look at systems to learn about how we break things apart, and we study things so that we can get details. But I think what I've always been so impressed with your approach, and the people that you and I train, we both try to go about this is like, hey, we can look at the nuances, we can look at the symptoms, we can look at the science, but we're still treating a person and their environment and their family system and everything. And it's like really more of we're looking at everything because we're treating a whole person. It's really that whole person approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I really don't think that you can help somebody to get better if you're not looking at them that way. At least
Mm.
that's what my experience has taught me.
So then, as you kind of, it seems like you started to have more and more experience with Lyme and other these things because it comes in our offices. That's how so many of us really either we have it ourselves and or we see other people who have it, and whether it's a family member and we learn about it, or we're a practitioner and they come in our office. Um, what was the impetus behind sort of like Lyme Core? Because to me it's like there's a zillion supplement companies out there, and some of people are combining a bunch of stuff into these blends that may or may not have a lot of science behind them. But there's a gazillion companies. So why go out of your way to create another herbal company? Because I mean, it's just one of these things that I think is really, when you see, to me, the market's kind of flooded almost, right? So, I mean, I think it's almost like an uphill battle if you're going to move into this space, as opposed to say, like, if you'd done anti-aging pills 15 years ago, it was a little easier than it might be today. So, like, what was the
Right.
impetus for dropping into this area of supplements?
So the biggest impetus for me starting Lyme Botanicals, I think, goes back to like my own personal journey with Lyme and Babesia, Bartonella, Mycoplasma, Chlamydia, pneumoniae. So, I had done, well, first of all, I was fortunate enough to be Lyme literate myself when I started having symptoms. And then I was fortunate enough to be able to work with amazing practitioners like yourself when I was sick. But, despite the really good care that I received in the 18 months of combination pharmaceutical antibiotics, every time I tried to get off antibiotics, my symptoms would come back. And so one morning or middle of the night, actually 3 a.m., times where I would wake up with significant insomnia and anxiety, I got my laptop out and I started searching for natural cures for Lyme disease because I remembered that woman that I had treated in clinic. And I found Stephen Buhner. And so Stephen Buhner, honestly, I would say from an herbal perspective, has kind of taught me everything that I know about herbal medicine and vector-borne disease. But he didn't really have a lot of products. He gave like general recommendations. And so, long story short, the co founder of Lyme Botanicals, Dr. Frank Ieda, and myself were kind of left trying to piece together because he was sick as well. And we ran into each other at one of Buhner's conferences. And so, we were kind of like piecemealing all of these various herbs from all of these different companies, sourcing them from all over. And then one of the companies that made cat's claw went out of business. And so, we were frustrated. We were running out of products for our patients. And we decided there has to be a better way. We can do this. How hard can it be? I think literally those were Frank's words. And so we started out with our first product using the two herbs that we felt were the most important, and actually corresponded with Stephen Buhner about making this product, which is the foundation formula. And so
Mm,
it has 50% Japanese knotweed, 15% cat's claw. And, really no matter what infection you're treating, because of the way those two herbs help to modulate the pro-inflammatory cytokine cascade, protect the endothelial cell, modulate the immune system, and increase natural killer cells, as well as both being anti-spirochetal. They're kind of like the foundational approach to treatment. And so, really it was the theme of, we see a need for something and it's inhibiting our ability to treat ourselves and our patients. And so we just went out and solved the problem. I never had any interest in owning or running a supplement company ever.
right.
You know, it wasn't because, oh, I thought this was a great way to, make money or something.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because I think so much of this is born out of need. It's like you find something that you need to help your patient, you help yourself. I actually created a formula that because I saw someone where we were having them kind of make it on their own, and they were like, it's great, but I can't be consistent with it. It tastes like trash. So like, I'm like, well, maybe we can put in a capsule. And I work with a compounding pharmacy. And like, it took us like 4 to 6 months to figure out how to now melt the capsule and do all this other stuff. And then finally, I was just like, all of a sudden, they have a product line based upon my thing. And I'm like, why am I not in this? And it's like,
Right.
part of me is like, I should be getting a little bit of, return here. But the other part is like, I don't want to run a supplement company. So it's like, when you did that, I'm like, it's crazy. Um, One of the things that I think is really one of my challenges is everybody wants to find the cheaper version. Everybody wants to find the available version. Everybody wants to find the best version, and they want it to be the cheapest, which is sometimes you can do and sometimes you can't. But one of my biggest concerns is things like, I know that's really core to Lyme Botanicals are things like the purity of the products, the potency, because and I know we're definitely going to dive into like how to get the most, you know, treatment bang for your buck, so to speak, in terms of how, whole herbs and tinctures and things of that nature. But the other thing is like consistency is a big deal as well, because it's like, I mean, I feel like we get products and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not good from a lot of companies. And so I just thought it'd be good to maybe if we could talk a couple minutes about just like the process, because it's very infrequent that I say, I know the people who are sourcing this. I can find out exactly where they sourced it from. And I know literally the hands that are doing the tincturing and the work here. So like, I think it's very unusual in this day and age to not be a multinational conglomerate, because so many of the smaller companies have gotten bought up by these bigger companies, and then everything they're doing has been changed. And so, every couple of months I'm like, crap, I can't use them anymore. I can't use them because they've lost it. So I mean, what are you guys doing that's so different from that kind of purity, potency, and consistency perspective?
Well, I mean, I would say it probably starts with the fact that we are a very small company, and my hands literally are in everything. And so are my husband. So my husband, Scott, actually makes the tinctures, which is what you were just referring to. So we have our tinctures that literally are made in Hebron, Connecticut by my husband. We have our capsules where we have a contract manufacturer, because we do not want to purchase or run encapsulation machines. And then we also have some other products that, are white labeled. And so, they come from other companies that I have vetted and trust, because I really don't believe in reinventing the wheel. So I
Right.
wanted to stick with the things that are the hardest to get, that are the most finicky, and really have control over those things. So, I would say, if you want to talk about tincturing first, I mean, it starts with finding the source. So you have to
Right.
find the herb that, didn't like wasn't something, no offense, that was brought in from China. Like, you want to try to find the herb that comes from its natural habitat. And I
Right.
prefer wild crafted herbs even over organic herbs, because if something is wild crafted, it means that it was living out in nature by itself, fending for itself against the elements, right? So when herbs have to fight off pests, part of the medicinal constituents that actually act as medicine in the body are produced because that plant has to protect itself from an insect or from a toxin or from a harsh weather environment. You can kind of think of it, Tom, I know you'll appreciate this one, when it comes to wine, right? So, like,
Yep.
certain years of wine might be so much more exquisite because that was a really terrible winter, like something weird
Yeah. The
happened,
stress that
right?
went under. Yeah.
Exactly, right. So it changes the constituents and the components of the grape, and therefore changes the wine. So to me, wild crafted herbs are so much better because they are potent. And since we are going to be testing the final product, it doesn't necessarily matter what environment it's coming from, because we are going to test it to make sure that it doesn't have pesticides, that it doesn't have heavy metals, that it doesn't have other microbes, or like bacteria, yeast, things like that in there that could make it more toxic.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I'm just thinking about is I had a podcast conversation with Jill Krista relatively recently. Um, and we talked a lot about how why are some people able to get better and other people, it just, no matter what they do, no matter how much remediation they do, no matter how many houses they look at, no matter how much treatment they do, the mold, they always find mold or they always find Lyme. And it's just like some people just relapse over and over. And the question is like, hey, it's coming back in your life for you to actually focus on a piece of healing that you may have overlooked. And when you were talking, it was just reminding me like sometimes, and not sometimes, actually, the way the human body works is stress actually leads to growth if we allow it, and that stressor is not too much. So if the stressor on these plants is too much, they might not make it. But if not, that plant's gonna be so much stronger. And so, one, I agree, we want those, but number two, hey, if it's working for the plants that are and the fungi that are around us, maybe we should go, hey, the stressors that are in my life, as long as I go about, properly balancing it all out, actually are opportunities for growth. And I think that a lot of us can learn to something about ourselves, our environment and our connection or lack thereof to our environment. Like these are things that these pathogens are in our lives to teach us, and the herbs that can treat the pathogens are saying the same exact thing. Like reconnect to your natural environment. Like I mean, I just think about mold. Like when it's outside, it doesn't really make mycotoxins, but when it comes inside, it's like insane because it's
Right.
in the improper environment, and it just goes,
Right. It's all about the ecosystem. So just
mm-hmm.
like the mycotoxins outside in the proper ecosystem don't contribute to illness, really.
Right.
You know, it's when it comes indoors and the whole ecosystem changes, or, you know, when we have all of these pathogens that live in our bodies. And I mean, and we all have multiple viruses, bacteria, parasites, like these are normal things, fungi that live in our bodies. When our ecosystem is strong and resilient, they don't cause any problems at all. It's when our
So we don't have to kill it
ecosystem,
all.
what?
We don't have to kill it all.
No, we don't want to be sterile. What fun would that be?
I know it's like kind of a little of a side tangent, but I find a lot of people want to take antibiotics until they kill everything, which is not even possible.
Right.
And
Not
and you can put
possible.
right and antimicrobial herbs even like not possible. So if we can take a little side tour into this ecosystem conversation, like from a higher level, what are we talking about? Because I think so many people just make it about the pathogen. And if you and definitely people talk about terrain or whatever, but detoxification and mitochondria. But how do you think about like the overarching approach to someone? Like what is the goal of treatment for a patient?
So I would say, for simplicity's sake, if I had to pick one thing to focus on and one thing alone, like my ultimate goal is to recover the immune system. Because, to your point, no antimicrobial, herbal, or pharmaceutical is going to obliterate this infection, right? It's the immune system that has to come in and hold these microbes in the levels that are safe for the body, so to speak, right? So
Mm-hmm.
maybe in some people, the immune system is able to eradicate some of the bacteria or viruses. And other people, maybe it's just holding it into remission, it's stopping it from replicating, it's keeping it dormant, right? And for me, those are the two outcomes that I'm always striving for. But just because the goal is to normalize immune function and balance and restore immunocompetence, there's so many other things in the body that have to be looked at in order to achieve that. And I think some of the biggies are the pro-inflammatory cytokine cascade. So if you have excessive amounts of cytokines that are pushing the immune system into further dysregulation, you're not going to be able to rebuild the immune system and to get it regulated and functioning properly.
Right.
If your microbiome isn't diverse and isn't in a healthy state, you're not going to be able to manage the immune response. You're not going to be able to manage the inflammation. And when you have excess toxins coming into the body, whether that's in the form of, you know, physical toxins like organophosphates or phthalates or parabens, or the things that are in our food and in our self-care products and cleaning products, or we're talking about toxic media or EMF, right? All of
Mm-hmm.
these different levels of toxins coming in, we know that all of those variations negatively affect our immune system and our nervous system, right? So there's all of these other things in the terrain that get altered by these infections that ultimately lead to this immune dysfunction And you know as well as I do, we have to act as a medical detective and go in there and figure
Hmm.
out, what are the pieces of the puzzle of the terrain of that individual person that we have to manipulate in order to restore the immune system. And then to take it a step further, we also need to know how these various infections work. So when I talk about how to use herbs, it's not just, well, these herbs are good at killing Borrelia. It's like, well, what does Borrelia do to the body? Like, which inflammatory cytokines does Borrelia exploit? How does Borrelia cause immune imbalance? What ways does Borrelia evade the immune system? Right. And
Hmm.
then know, what organs does it like to live in? What does it like to eat from the human body for food? And if we can answer all of these questions about the bacteria, we can then start using herbs and other nutraceuticals to literally inhibit the process in which it uses to do these things. And now you're putting together really intelligent protocols that are custom tailored not only to the patient, but to the type of organism that's causing the infection or infections, right?
Hmm.
And then we make like this beautiful protocol that's encompassing everything instead of just memorizing this kills that, that kills this, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of us want just like the protocol, and it's like it's going to be different for everybody. But we start with the foundation of that knowledge you talked about, and I mean that's what I love about botanicals too is they're multitaskers. Like a lot of people have heard, oh, some of the antibiotics, very many of them have anti-inflammatory properties, but they're not that much. I mean, come on, doxycycline is not stronger than a steroid taper. It's just not real,
Yeah.
unless the inflammation is from an infection. But I'll get off my soapbox before I go down that tangent. But I think that's one of the things, like you can put together a much more intelligent protocol where you're using whole herbs that are tinctured, and then you're able to get like, hey, it protects your heart, it protects your liver, it protects your brain and your GI tract while killing stuff,
Right.
as opposed to the other ones that damage this, damage that, damage that, damage that, and then you feel a little bit better. Then you spend 6 years fixing the damage that the treatment caused. And
Right.
sometimes we need that, right? But I think the combination and thinking about it in that way is really important, to be able to set down and, create an intelligent protocol based upon the knowledge of how all this works. And so, like, we do have newer evidence in the last handful of years where, especially the work out of Johns Hopkins, that showing us which botanicals work for growing and non-growing Lyme, Babesia duncani, Bartonella henselae, as well as some essential oil studies. I mean, when you see those types of things, I mean, they're saying like use this to kill Lyme, which obviously I like, because at least I know what works for Lyme and what doesn't. And some of the stuff everybody uses for Lyme traditionally has zero activity in a petri dish.
Right.
So how do you go about, combining sort of like the tradition? Because I think one of the challenges for the conventionally minded person, even who's moving into to a functional medicine, more naturopathic approach to things, is that most of the herbal research is like conceptual. There's not a lot of like double blind placebo controlled trials on herbs. Of course, there's not really on a lot of, way less meds than you actually think there are. But how do you blend sort of like that traditional herbal, the herbalist, naturopath, sort of street knowledge, if you will, of how these botanicals work with this emerging sort of scientific community trying to figure out how to integrate botanicals into more of my thing is like they just want to find out what kills Lyme, right?
Right.
So how do we blend the sort of the modern scientific approach with the old school scientific approach of like actually being out in nature and treating real human beings, not just doing a test tube study?
Right. Well, I mean, I think the first thing that I would say is that, some of these studies that have been done, in a test tube or a petri dish, however you want to say, and actually show some of the antimicrobial effects, it's like, to me, I'm like, you know what? You have to think, what would happen if you actually got to put that in a human body and study it, knowing all of these side benefits, knowing, like, let's look at Japanese knotweed. So we know that Japanese knotweed affects various, stages of the spirochete of Borrelia. But if you also look at Japanese knotweed's ability to protect the endothelial cell, its ability to inhibit a majority of the pro-inflammatory cytokines, its ability to be neuroprotective, right? So we have like all of these other things that it does as side benefits in addition to its killing ability. So
Right.
it's like I would love to see these studies done in real people, knowing the far reaching benefits of these herbs versus just were they able to kill something in a test tube. So,
Or at least in a mouse model, right? Because I mean,
yeah.
in most of our stuff for most infectious disease research is done in vitro in the petri dish or test tube, and much less commonly is it studied in a mammal model. And then ultimately, some of these things are just like, they at some point something in the class got studied in a big trial with big pharma, but yeah, it's like, I'm just thinking about tefenoquine, that, they've done human studies on it and trials on it, but in malaria, but now they want to use it in babesia. So we have a mouse model and everybody's like, oh my God, it's amazing. And it is, but it's like that it costs a lot of money, and a lot of times we get the mouse model. Now we're doing chronic babesiosis trials on the medicine that's never even been trialed in acute babesia. We just did case reports,
Right.
and I'm like, and I'm okay with that, but I'm just saying it's like it would be nice. Everybody who's listening who knows people who are funding this kind of research, let's get some in vivo studies even if it's in a mouse or a monkey, because we've learned so much about tick-borne illnesses there. Why don't we start doing botanicals that way too? And I guess like the other part that I think of, Myriah, is like one of the challenges with a lot of our studies is they're like, oh, we're going to do rhesus macaque monkeys, like, Dr. Ember's study, and we're going to do 28 days of IV ceftriaxone, and then we're going to do 56 days of doxycycline after that. I don't know many people who know what they're doing in chronic Lyme disease who would treat anybody that way. They wouldn't be, meaning I wouldn't be on a single agent. And in an acute Lyme, go for it. I still don't do single agents, but like I could see a month of IV ceftriaxone and somebody's got heart block and they're in the hospital and you want to save their life. Then they need to come to one of us and actually get better. But
Right.
how do you, like, one of the things, one of the challenges I think in scientific studies of this is we don't practice separate medicine. We don't do like, okay, do Japanese knotweed for 8 weeks, now do cryptolepis for 2 weeks, and then do Chinese skullcap.
Well, it
So
wouldn't work if you did.
why not?
Because they work synergistically with each other. And so it's kind of like, if you're, I don't know why this is coming to mind, but like if you're playing a baseball game, right? And you've got someone on home, someone on first, you've got like your shortstop, third baseman, I'm forgetting second base, but it's like you need
A
all the
team.
players to play the game, right? So like it doesn't make sense to like, we're going to modulate the inflammation and use something that's a little bit more of like, let's say, a weed killer for a couple weeks. Then all of a sudden we're going to let that go and we're going to jump over to cryptolepis and we're going to really like, to me, cryptolepis is one of the harder hitters and it's also antiparasitic and plasmodial. So, and then we're going to jump over here and do that. Then we're going to go over here and we're going to do some immune modulation. And then, oh, let's spend a couple weeks on detox. It's like,
Right.
well, detox needs to be going all along. And, again, like we want to cover all the bases. So you can't balance the immune system without modulating the pro-inflammatory cytokine cascade, right? You can't, like, it's like all of these things are contingent on each other. So you kind of have to do a well-rounded approach. And I'm not saying you can't switch herbs, but just like monotherapy antibiotics don't really work, monotherapy herbal medicine doesn't work either.
Well, yeah, that's what I was. I mean, like monotherapy. That's why most of modern medicine doesn't work. And then, and I think one of the things we get to, and I mean, I know you do this, and so many of the people that we talk to work on this, but getting to that root cause of like what the hell is really going on. And the reality is, in 2025, the root cause is causes. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, everybody's got stress. People need to sleep better. People need to turn off their blue lights. You've got the toxic social media. You've got the toxic political landscape. And that goes for every side of the aisle at this point. I mean, because as much as I have my own personal political views, I know that I'm not allowed, no one runs to really talk about it because it's all opinion. But a lot of it is like, you look at it like conventional medicine is, hey, you know what? Like, you're overweight and you're going to get metabolic syndrome. So why don't I put you on this one medicine and not have you change your lifestyle? And, maybe you should cut out the sugar and go to the gym. But, I really can't tell you to do that because your physician, also don't do that, and it's like, for some reason, we're allowed to go to medical school. And if our BMI is 57, that's still okay. Like, I mean, I'm not saying we should, discriminate against people, but if a doctor doesn't even try to be healthy, maybe they shouldn't be accepted. But that's just my own side thing. But, it's like, the problem is then we go, let's not address the real problem. And then let's cover it with a Band-Aid medication. Oh, well, now we have another, because we didn't really fix the problem. We have another medicine to add. And then we add polypharmacy, which is different than a combination protocol that's intelligently created. This is just keep adding shit on because it ain't working.
Or because you've now caused another side effect. Right. Now you've caused a side effect and you need another medicine to deal with the side effect.
Right. So that aside, because we don't need to spend time on that. I think most people who listen to the Lyme Insider know, they get that, hey, we use the medicines when we need to, but let's step back and really treat you as a whole human being so you heal well. And let's do it as naturally as possible so we're connected with the planet and the intelligence. So when you're looking at someone, because one of the questions that I get all the time is like, do you really want me to take all this stuff? And do you really want me to take it 3 times a day rather than 2 times a day? And I'm like, always like, the answer is like, no. What I really meant to say was something completely different than I said. And I just spent the last 20 minutes making a protocol and educating you on it because I didn't want you to do that. I mean, obviously, yes, I gave you a protocol for a reason. And my litmus test is I'm not going to ask you to do something I wouldn't do myself or recommend to my wife or my mother or my daughter or my brothers. So, yeah, I want you to do that. But there is a reality that some people are just, I feel like there's a sweet spot is what I'm getting at. In, too much or too little. And so how do you have like guidelines of the ways that you think about creating protocols?
So, I mean, let's talk about the number of times a day that you need to do something for it to be effective. I think that's an important one, and it's a straightforward one. It's like, if you were going to prescribe tetracycline to someone, how many times a day would they need to take it for it to be effective? 3?
Yeah.
Right. But if you're talking about doxy, maybe it's 2, right? So, I mean, different compounds used in medicine have different half-lives, excuse me. And so, keeping a cellular concentration steady in the body is what is going to have the best chance of achieving the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. When it comes to herbal medicine, specifically the herbals that we're talking about to treat vector-borne disease, most of them need to be given 3 times a day. Some of them, it's actually recommended they be given 4 to 6 times a day. So compromising has already happened when we're talking about taking it 3 times a day. So my experience is that taking these herbs twice a day will bring about change. You'll see a decrease in severity. You'll see a decrease in frequency of symptoms. Generally, the patient will feel better. But it's almost like doing it at that dose is a Band-Aid, right? It might be a natural Band-Aid. They might feel better, but they're never going to cross the finish line. And I know that there are practitioners that would disagree with me. I'm telling you my opinion and my experience for doing this for almost 20 years now. So 3
what
times
about
a
resistance?
day. What do you mean?
What if you underdose? Do you get resistance?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. With antibiotics, yes.
100%. Right.
Yeah. With the
How?
herbs, I don't know. I've looked in many, many sources. I have not, everything that I find says that these bugs do not build tolerance to herbs. Now, if you're taking them in a lower dose, would they? I don't know. I think that the difference is, and again, I know what I need to know about pharmaceuticals for interactions, toxicity. I want to make sure everyone, if they did a pharmaceutical, they did it, per the dose, and I know the side effects and whatnot, but that's not my expertise. Okay. But, my understanding is that, for example, with an herb that is anti-spirochetal, that is anti-spirochetal, the whole spirochete, the whole bacteria. It's not like when you're working with an antibiotic and it's like, well, this antibiotic is going to, interfere with something in the cell wall, or it's going to inhibit this enzyme that's needed for replication. So it's like with pharmaceutical antibiotics, you're targeting like one component of a bacteria, and
Right.
that's how it kills it or stops it from replicating either way. Versus, again, with herbs, when you're looking at something that was, that is part of nature, that evolved to help to rid or control something else that's in nature. And again, it's going after the whole organism. It works differently. So it's
Mm-hmm.
more like, the spirochete realizes how it's being killed with a pharmaceutical antibiotic because it's so simplistic, and it learns that mechanism, and through pleomorphism, right, it changes its structure, and then that is how it's able to build resistance. I don't believe that the same thing happens with the herbs.
Yeah, I mean, and then like Lyme, we have one study that shows maybe possibly resistance, but it's more the getting smarter. It's persisting, which is a different term in medicine. Basically means, like you said, it doesn't become like, it's not that the antibiotic doesn't work. It's just the bug changes, so the antibiotic doesn't work. So it's not like the bug like pulls the medicine in and kicks it back out, which is one of the mechanisms of resistance. But in babesiosis and Bartonellosis, we have evidence of resistance and persistence, whereas with Lyme, it's primarily persistence. And that's one of the things I love about the herbs. Like if I just took cryptolepis, and in fact, even though it's actually almost all the herbs that have been shown to be effective against Borrelia, at least in the Hopkins studies out of Dr. Zhang's lab. So we've got black walnut hull, we've got cat's claw, Japanese knotweed, Chinese skullcap, and I think there's one other skullcap, but that does it. They all are more effective for growing and non-growing or active infection versus persister cells than doxycycline or cefuroxime.
Yeah.
These are so
It's a
they
pretty
are
big outcome.
actually, and I think it's probably because of what you said, right? It's targeting not a piece of replication, not a piece of metabolism, but multiple pieces of replication and metabolism, aka the whole spirochete. And cryptolepis is literally the only thing ever studied to completely eradicate Lyme disease and not allow it to regrow in subculture. So basically, in English, that's like the closest thing to preventing relapse that we can say,
Yep.
and so it's a challenge. One of the things that, like, I 1,000% agree with you. Take it more frequently. Every single person that comes to my office and I say take it twice a day and they take it once a day, they're like, oh, I can't do it twice a day. Do I really need to? And I'm like, yes, that's why I recommended that way. And they'll all get a little better. And then they're stuck. And we have that conversation. And then they go to 2 times a day and it's better. Now, if it's a 3 or 4 time a day approach that's required, same thing. They're taking it twice a day because they're lazy. I mean, or I let them back in the day. Now I just like, no, 3 times a day. But I've seen so many people when they go to the target recommendation from the provider who understands what's going on, they get so much better, so much faster.
Yeah. You know what else is funny too? I've had, this has happened a handful of times at least, where someone will come in and it was someone who was doing amazingly, like better progress than you would expect. And then all of a sudden they plateau and it's like, did you change anything? No. Are you still taking your herbs? Yes. Are you still taking your G3M? Yes. Are you still taking all of the other supplements that you were deficient, all the nutrients? Yes, 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 yes. And then it's like, Are you still taking your herbs 3 times a day? Well, no, it was hard to take them when I was at school or whatever, and it's like, no, most days I've only been doing them twice a day. And it's like, okay. And then
There
you
you have it.
go back to 3 times a day. They come back in 2 months later, and there they are making strides again. So, I have so many kids in the practice that we treat, and we treat herbally. And I've had to write letters to nurses, letters to principals, and it's really no big deal. My son had to mix his own herbs in school at 5 years old, and he did every single day. So if my 5-year-old kid can do it himself, anybody listening to this can mix up their herbs and take them, whether
Well,
they're
it's
at
like,
school, they're at work, they're in their car. It doesn't matter. If you want to do it, you'll do it.
well, it's like the whole capsule thing. My daughter it was 3.5 and she was learning to take capsules,
Yeah.
and it's just like people are, I can't do that. I'm like, you can, or you haven't tried and you don't want to.
Yep.
I really do think it's important to understand, like, if it's important, you find a way. Do you have any like particular tricks for, like, I think, we sort of dove into tinctures over whole or capsules. I think tinctures, just the controllable, the ability to titrate dose up or down if you happen to be working with a sensitive person, or a treat, a Herxheimer type of reaction. Um, and even like just the absorbability and the efficacy, I just feel is so much more. And I mean, I wanted to see like what your take is on that. And then the other part is just like, so many people are, oh, well, my kids won't take this, or, oh, it's gross, I don't want to take it. Like, and I know we have similar tricks, but I would really love for you to just share with everyone, like, you know tinctures versus whole herb capsules, what's the difference, and then are there tricks to getting people to be able to more easily take some of these treatments? Because I will admit, I mean, cryptolepis tastes like crap. I mean,
They all
it really,
do. They all taste like crap.
yeah.
There's not one of them that tastes good, that's enjoyable. I mean, if you were to just take it by itself. But yeah. So let me do this. So I would say number one, think about the fact that almost every single patient already has an inflamed gut, whether it's from the infection, whether it's from taking previous antibiotics, whether it's from having, glyphosate in the food and being stressed out and sympathetic dominance, right? All of these various
Right.
things. Most people have gut issues going on when they have a chronic vector borne disease. So, when you have an inflamed gut and you use a tincture where you've already had all of these medicinal constituents extracted from the herb and they're there, they're bioavailable, you're going to have a much easier time absorbing them in an inflamed gut. Okay. Versus if you have to actually digest the herb in the capsule, and then your body, your digestive enzymes have to actually extract those constituents and absorb them into the body, right? So I think that number one, herbal tinctures are much easier to digest and absorb than their capsule counterpart. Number two, the amount of capsules that one would have to swallow for each herb, for a fourth of a teaspoon of, let's say, Japanese knotweed, the equivalent is about 4 capsules, 3 to 4 capsules of the herb, depending on the capsule size. And so, if we're wanting to put, let's just say, most standard herbs that were studied, Japanese knotweed, cat's claw, cryptolepis, black walnut, Chinese skullcap, and I know I'm forgetting one just like you did, but so 6 times 3, like, do you want to swallow 18 pills 3 times a day in addition to the vitamins, the minerals, the EPA, DHA, the vitamin D, probably choline and serine, and your probiotic? And it's like, holy shit, like, how many pills do you want to swallow a
Right.
day? Versus you can make like this one, and a lot of my patients can't swallow. They have dysphagia
The infections.
because of the infection and the esophagus being a smooth muscle and not having that muscle coordination or getting esophageal spasms or what have you, right? So I think it's so much easier to make a little cocktail that you're going to drink and not have to worry about choking down pills and capsules. Now, as far as the taste goes, you get used to it. It's not that bad.
It's just
Number
rule number.
one,
It's just rule number 5, but
number
most people
one,
don't.
um, something that I use that I use is the G3M product, right? So it's the specialized modified citrus pectin. Well, wait, I can say what it is. So it's pectosol that has a natural lime flavor, and it actually tastes really good. It tastes like limeade or like a healthy sour mix. And so for adults and kids, it actually makes the tinctures way more palatable. With adults, we call it a limerita. With kids, I call it limeade. And, I've had so many parents who have tried to doctor up the herbs in so many different ways, fill it up in a syringe, squirt it down the back of the kid's throat. And I'm like, did you try mixing it in the G3M yet? No. Why not? Because I don't think they'll like it. Okay, cool. Can you please just do it? And then I will literally get videos sent to me like, oh my God, I put it in like my 18-month-old's bottle and they're drinking it. And it's like, yup.
Yeah, I
Or
know. I told
my
you.
kids are doing I've had two different families make me music videos of their kids taking their tinctures mixed with their G3M. It's hysterical. It's like, the other thing is like if the parent is cringing and doesn't think they're gonna do it, then guess what? The kid's going to feed into that and they're not going to do it.
There's so much. It's such a good point. There's so many people who are just like, it's not going to work. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you want your kid to take it, you have to do exactly what you want them to do. You
Mhm.
must
Lead by
be a leader.
example.
Yes. And I'm not saying that you got to always take everything the same, but you can take those herbs a couple times or even just mix up some G3M by itself and slug it, drink it together. You
Mhm.
know,
But
but
you
it's
know what,
like,
Tom? It's also a life lesson. Sometimes we have to do things that we don't like to do because it's good for us and because we need to get better. End of story.
well, hey, I can't have my kid. I can't, my kid won't turn this off because they'll cry.
Mm.
They'll miss their video game and I'll have to parent them for real. I'm just saying, like, I mean, I think it's a really important point that you're bringing up is like, look, life isn't necessarily always easy. No one deserves to get these illnesses, but you got it.
Right.
So, what I do know is you do not deserve to get it. You got it, and you also deserve and can get better.
Right.
So,
And
but
I'm not sitting here either, and I know you're not either. I'm not like sitting here on my high horse preaching. Like I've had to do this myself. My son has had to do this 3 times, not because he didn't get better, not because he wasn't healed, but because ticks are a real problem where we're from. And he has now been bit 3 times by an infected tick. He's been bit, and thank God we do tick checks every single night. I mean, he's been bit 12 times. 3 out of 12 times his tick
it was
tested
positive, yeah.
positive and he needed to be treated, and he's turning 9 next week. So, the first time that we treated him, oh my gosh, the first time we had to treat him, I think he was 4. He was between 4 and 5, and then at 6, he got bit with a tick that had Babesia and Borrelia, and then just about 6 weeks ago, he got bit again. And by the way, that sucker was fully embedded within an hour. I mean, like sticking straight up and down. I put a picture on Instagram of me removing the tick properly for people that don't know how to do that. Anyways, long story short, that tick tested positive for just anaplasma. So here we are back on herbs again.
The
Um,
thing that I hear you saying though is you've made it not you've made it normal.
yeah,
It's
it's
not
yeah,
like it's like, hey, when these things happen, this is medicine. This is what we do. I
right.
also know you don't throw anti-inflammatories at them like over the counters. Just I have an ache and a pain, so like let's just like blow out the system. It's like,
He's
but
never
it's like
taken ibuprofen in his life.
yeah, and so you look at it over time though. Start early. Lead
Yeah.
a detoxification, healthy lifestyle. The reason your kids want to eat a bunch of crap is you let them, and
Hmm.
probably you do too. And it's like we lead a relatively healthy lifestyle. I did grow up in the 80s when people didn't really talk about this, or at least not the people I knew. So my body's had a whole bunch of toxic crap, but I rarely do any of that stuff anymore. My kid lives in 2025 in the real world. She's exposed to things, but her default is healthy eating, healthy lifestyle, healthy mindset. Like, it doesn't mean she started working at a movie theater recently for the summer. And, there's stuff at a movie theater is not as healthy as all the things, but I know that there's exposures out there in the real world. And if I'm like, Nazi about it, it's going to backlash. But it's like we have a conversation. I said, hey, I know you're going to have those, that candies and stuff there. Just let's try to like keep it. We don't really eat that stuff at home. I know that your friends do. I know you're going to try it. My body has had it before because I didn't grow up in a naturopathic or osteopathic household. But like we know now more than we did when I grew up.
Right. And Tom, it's all about balance. So the thing is, you know what? You can control what's in your home. You can control what she eats in your home, right? And so this is kind of our philosophy. Now, in the beginning, we were strictly no gluten, no dairy, no sugar, while his, from when he was born through probably around 4 or 5 years old, I was very, very strict. I was the mom bringing the gluten-free, dairy-free, cupcake to said birthday party that we were going to that had, the red dye Spider-Man cake, and all of the kids are like literally swinging from the rafters, and all the parents are like, God, what happened to my child? Gee, I don't know. Anyways, but now it's like, we make really good food, high quality food. We don't really bring that junk into our house. But when he goes to the birthday party, or we go to a special event, like we go to the movies, okay, I do make my own popcorn with olive oil and salt and smuggle it in because I'm sorry. I just won't let him eat the movie theater popcorn.
The oil that, Talia just told me that me and Jill and I that apparently there's a real butter stand at the local movie theater, but most of them are not real butter. So all except one. So if you want real butter, you can ask, and maybe your local movie theater has it.
Really?
I mean, this is Park City, so I mean, who knows if it's like just because we're like little bougie or something. I don't know, but it's like it was crazy. I was like, "Are you for real?" But it's important. You got to, so ask the questions, and it's important to be able to say, like, look, I don't want to put these nasty ass fake chemicals into my body, especially like a liquid, 8 tons of it on my popcorn, like, But it's interesting. It's like, it's a lifestyle and a habit. So I tell people all the time, your diet was never ever meant to be something that you did to prepare for bikini season or a wedding. Diet is literally a descriptor of your eating lifestyle. So all of this is the average, the lifestyle that you lead, so it's just like, I had a little coffee when we were chatting earlier, and then both of us are drinking our water out of our ball jars that we have, because hydration is important for like everything. But it's a lifestyle. It's like some days I'm more hydrated than others, but I can guarantee you I'm more hydrated than 99% of people you meet.
Yeah. Well, and I think the key thing that people forget is that nutrition, nutrients, food is information. And it either tells your body to do good things or bad things. And really, I think you can simplify it to that. And that, hopefully drives the point home to people. Like there's like certain nutrients can either turn on bad genes or turn them off, right? So do we want our bad genes on or off? Do we want our good genes, just to simplify an overly complicated thing?
Right.
Nutrients literally deliver the message.
Well, and it's like, then everybody wants, like, they ask me, what's the best supplement or IV for brain detoxification? And I unequivocally say sleep. With a whole bunch of this.
Yeah.
Because you primarily, which is water for anyone who's listening and not watching.
Right.
Hydration, right? So it's like
and your brain salt would be great.
Oh,
get the water
real,
in.
right? So it's like, but it's like, I need to, how does the body function? 80 to 90% of all brain detoxification happens while one is in deep sleep. Maybe you should focus on that rather than buying shit and putting it in your mouth and then complaining to me that you're putting too much in your mouth and it costs too much. I'm like, oh, I
Right.
told you the thing to do. Get up in the morning, go outside and get some fresh air and some natural light to kick on melatonin production, which
Right.
melatonin is your sleep hormone. And then at night, this crazy idea, put on some blue blockers, turn off the TV a little earlier, cool the temperature down, make your room cool and dark and make it comfortable. Your bed is for two things. If you're an adult, sleep and sex. And if you're a kid, it's for sleep. That's it. Nothing else.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
it's like, people are like, do you live that way? I'm like, yeah, we actually, the place we own now, when we bought it, they have televisions in like every single bedroom.
Yeah.
Do you know how many of those are in the entire house are connected to anything that would actually make them turn on? The one in the living room that's on the wall.
That's great.
Because you don't do that in your bedroom because it's sacred. But
Well, and how many people lay in bed with their cell phone literally 12 inches from their eyes or closer, right? And they're
right.
just literally shining not only the light, but the electromagnetic radiation, like just literally just shining that into your eyes, into your brain right before you want to go to sleep. And
Oh
then you
yeah.
wonder why you can't go to sleep.
I love it when it's like right there or right in their crotch.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, you really want to know. Yeah, So one of the things that, because we could talk about this stuff all day long. You mentioned G3M, and it is not just something that I utilize, and I know you utilize for making things taste better, but
Right.
it's like, it's very interesting that it really should be dosed 3 or 4 times a day, which is really when your herbs should be dosed. But
Right. How
imagine
convenient.
that, nature, huh? But what if you can give us a quick down low on like, what are the, other than just making your herbs a little more palatable and making like your limeade or your limerita. And it's funny, I joke about this, about the lime margarita with so many people, and then they take it and they go, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And
but
then you start wanting it and craving it, like not even kidding.
but why though? Like, what else is it doing for your body other than just tasting good and helping
So
you,
it
mask the
does
flavor?
so much. Number one, it decreases something called galactin 3. And so galactin 3, to simplify a complicated thing, is basically a protein that keeps the immune system going. It keeps driving inflammation. In an acute situation, it's helpful. It helps to kill an infection or resolve an infection or heal an injury. But when it is chronically elevated, it leads to immune dysfunction. It leads to the formation of fibrosis, biofilms. It does a lot of not good things to the body. Okay. When you take this form of modified citrus pectin in the G3M, what it does is it modulates galactin 3. So it helps to bring galactin 3 levels back down to normal. In addition, it decreases interleukin 6 and interleukin 1 beta, which are two of the primary pro inflammatory cytokines that cause a lot of the symptoms of a Borrelia infection, as well as causes an imbalance in the T helper branch of the immune system. So by modulating those two inflammatory chemicals, you're able to decrease a lot of the pain and destruction in the body, as well as balance the immune system. Then it has a dose dependent increase of the CD57 cells, or the natural killer cells, which Borrelia often suppress. It binds endotoxins. And so endotoxins are what can cause a Herxheimer reaction and also kick off another inflammatory cytokine cascade. It helps to bind mycotoxins as well. It helps to heal the tight junctions in the gut, which, when they are kind of broken down and leaky, it increases intestinal permeability and can allow toxins to be reabsorbed into the body, as well as increases the likelihood that you would develop food sensitivities, things like that.
So
Oh,
essentially, you're
and it
saying
also
that
binds heavy
piece.
metals
Mm,
and it breaks down biofilm. So it is the one substance that literally hits every single treatment base other than being antimicrobial, because to my knowledge, it does not have
right.
antimicrobial effects.
Well, what I love too, when I was studying it and figuring out if it was making sense to bring into, our protocols, it essentially doesn't turn off the acute galactin-3 response, but it turns off the chronic. And like, that's like the holy grail of all things. And that's where it's
Right.
like, oh, wow, it's so crazy that like we want acute inflammation because that actually leads to healing. We don't want chronic inflammation. If you look at something like PRP, platelet rich plasma, people are using it is for like tendon and ligament injuries and stuff like that are chronically inflamed and haven't turned off because they initiate new acute inflammation to turn off the chronic inflammation and then allow the healing to happen. It's like, so this is not the same approach to it, but it essentially allows the same thing to happen. It doesn't prevent the acute effects, and chronically it turns these things off. And the comment I was going to interject was just for anyone who's listening. I mean, basically what you're saying is one of the benefits of G3M is that it can actually help those with the tight junctions becoming leaky. That's leaky gut, right? And
Right.
mold can trigger that, food can trigger that. And then, like you said, all that. So just as a quick side note, I mean, you can heal leaky gut with that. So it's like, hey, you're getting synergistic blend that your practitioner has created with these herbs that are multitaskers that have much more than just anti-inflammatory properties. And then you're putting them in to a drink, where we're mixing water in the G3M. It's like that is going to turn off inflammation, do all those other amazing things you said. And it's like people are wondering, like, how do I prevent a herx? How do I optimize detoxification? Blah, 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 blah. And they're like, well, hey, why don't you just follow the protocol? And
Well,
this is
it's interesting. When I started using G3M way back, that was the one thing that I started noticing. Patients were having more steady progress and they
Mhm.
weren't going through these periods of herxing. So I developed a product called Herx, and we used to use it
Right.
all the time. I'm not even kidding you. So we, now that I've brought in G3M and now that I've sort of like slowed my roll, right, in my approach to treatment, so I make sure that I'm building the foundation before I try to build the house. I hardly ever have to put people on Herx anymore, on that Herx formula.
Right.
And I think that a big piece of that is because of using the G3M in the protocol, because of its ability to start healing the gut, because of its ability to bind the endotoxins,
Mm,
specifically those two reasons. And one of the things I forgot is that the G3M actually encourages healthy collagen formation. And we're talking about Borrelia, we're talking about Lyme. What does it eat? Where does it get its nutrients, right? From breaking down collagen and
right.
breaking down the connective tissue, the extracellular matrix. That's where it gets its nutrients from to live. And so the G3M helps to block that process, along with, if you combine it with Japanese knotweed, Chinese skullcap, and ashwagandha, you'll actually inhibit the three enzymes that Lyme exploits to break down the collagen and the extracellular matrix.
Yeah. It's so fascinating, right? Like, here you go. It's like not that hard, but you got to take it. And I think that one of the questions I get asked a lot, and a lot of my patients are like, look, I'm super sensitive. I can't handle anything. And I'm like, when I talk to you, you're like, yeah, I just start everybody on like, full dose right away. And I mean, I'm sure when we
When
say,
it's time to add the herbs, full dose right away,
yeah,
but there's some things that happen in the 4
in
to
the
8
interim,
weeks leading up to that.
no,
Yes.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we don't just drop nuclear bombs on people, but
But you wanna know what? Let me say this before I forget, Tom. I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
you're great.
Um, so I have patients who will spin their wheels and they'll pick one that's like, I can't do this herb. And then they'll go to the next one. I can't do that herb. And then they go to the next one. I can't do that herb. You want to know why? Because you're not getting the synergistic effect of taking them all together. Right. So it's like, again, when you have all of those bases covered, they're going to work in your body, in your physiology in a much different way than they're going to work when you're just using them individually. And so
Right.
that's one of the reasons why I say get on all of them, get on a full therapeutic dose, do them the number of times a day that you need to do them to keep that cellular concentration. And it's a different world when you do it that way.
Well,
Of
and I
course,
think,
if people are sensitive, then we will back off, you
but if
know?
you assume
That's
sensitivity and you underdose, I find more people are almost like trying to start a fire with like wet pine needles and
yeah,
grass rather than dry wood and kindling.
100%. Yes.
And you can actually, I see so many people, if they just go to the right dose, it's way better. And so I find myself going like, oh, go to them 5 drops 3 times a day and then 10 drops. And I'm like, oh my God, can we just cut to the chase? It helps. Some people need that. But I mean, I think a lot of people like, I remember back in the day talking with Wayne Anderson, who's a well-known naturopath, right? He's been doing this forever.
Yep.
Um, but Wayne was like, look, all these people come to me and they think they're going to get on all these herbs. And I can't tell you, it's like sometimes they just drop antibiotics or even IV antibiotics and they're all like, oh my God, what the, and it's like, but the point, and this conversation took place like 12 years ago before we had a little better understanding of some of these herbs anyway. But the point was like a lot of times people just think they can't handle anything and you just hammer them with something bigger, and you might even break, we're like you said, we're not really hammering them. We're prepping them and then we're starting an appropriate dose. But I just think it's interesting that sometimes you actually need antibiotics and sometimes you need herbs, but usually the people who don't do well on either of them are underdosing in my
Right.
experience.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing you can do is you can kind of get onto them strategically. Again, full doses, full therapeutic doses, but like maybe you start with an anti-inflammatory blend of herbs. Maybe you start with Japanese knotweed, Chinese skullcap, and ashwagandha, okay? Now, yes, Japanese knotweed has some antimicrobial abilities, many actually, and so does Chinese skullcap, but I don't consider them to be the big heavy hitters.
Right.
So I might, in someone that is self-proclaiming their sensitivity, start them with, no, I'm being
I
serious.
know, me too. But I'm just laughing because I'm so sick. I don't know if you hear this, but they're like, oh my God, like you've probably never seen anyone as sick as me. And I'm just like, guess
Yeah.
what? I've seen people way sicker than you. And
Yeah.
that I'm not trying to compare you to anybody else. And I'm not
Yeah,
saying you're not
no.
suffering, but just understand we see a lot of people who are
A lot of
really
really
sick.
sick people. Yeah.
Yeah. And
But
it's not a
anyway, so you can
competition.
start out with, ones that are have more
Right.
anti-inflammatory, nervine, calming actions, right? And we can kind of drain the bucket, so to speak, right? Get the inflammation down with them over several weeks. Then we can layer in like the cryptolepis, sweet Annie, black walnut, like get to the ones that have, to me, more traditional hardcore killing effects. But again, I wouldn't go from a low dose. I would do a full dose, but maybe strategically layer in
Right.
various herbs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great advice. Um, you know, and like I mentioned a minute ago, I'm sure you and I could talk all day about these topics. There's so much to share with everybody. Um, Kind of before we wrap up, because we've been going for a while here. There, like you like me, we whenever we have a half a minute or 2 minutes in our week, we decide to create a whole brand new project. So in addition to like Tau Vitality and Lyme Botanicals and running Lyme summits and teaching all over the planet, you run your own conference. And so I just wanted to see if you could share for a couple minutes what Lyme Bytes is and when it's happening this year, so we can get we'll obviously in the show notes give people information about getting there, but just would love to just like touch on that really briefly, so that everybody knows, because it's an amazing conference. I think I've been at I mean, I don't even know how many there's been. I think I've been in
You
all
have
of them.
been to everyone. You were even at the one before it was called Lyme Bites, and it was just me, you, and Bob from Igenics. Remember?
Oh my God.
You've been there since the
I have
inception.
been.
No, so anyways, I wanted to put together a conference for medical practitioners, for patients, and for industry experts. So, all of these wonderful companies, whether it's a testing company, a supplement company, a technology company, that specializes in treating Lyme and other vector-borne diseases. And then I also wanted to really bring in and highlight the fact that there are so many nonprofit organizations, that vary from educational, like iLads and MedMaps, over to ones that focus on treatment grants. And so, I thought, wow, I'm pretty plugged into the Lyme world. And I didn't realize that there were all of these foundations that provide treatment grants. And I think that was, one of the things that kind of lit a fire. And I was like, well, gosh, if I don't know about this, I would assume a lot of other people don't know about it either. So I kind of wanted to bring those four things together: the nonprofits, the vendors, the industry experts from that realm, the medical professionals, and the patients, and then provide what I would consider to be, you know, up to date, cutting edge, functional medicine knowledge on treatment, diagnosis, etc. About these infections. So it's kind of like bringing the education to these four and bringing
Mhm.
these four all together. So that's how it started. And we've always had an in-person symposium, which is intimate. My goal is always to keep it about 200 people or under, because I like people to be able to converse and not feel
Right,
intimidated.
right.
And then we have the live virtual aspect. And it's funny because over the years, patients and parents have tended to migrate towards this virtual option, whereas a lot of the medical practitioners will come in person. And so that's kind of what you would expect at this point. I would say 90% of the in person attendants are medical practitioners, and then the virtual is a mixed bag. But really, it's a chance for all of us to come together, have real frank discussions about what works, what doesn't work, what have we learned, and really share that with each other so that we're all able to leave with practical tools that we can implement back in our practices with our own patients on Monday.
Right.
And that's my biggest goal with that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's part of it. It's like a place where you can have those conversations, and it's always been practical. I find that like a lot of times, like a lot of places we discuss a lot of theory, and then people are like, "Well, what does that mean?" Like, "Oh, more to come." That's
Right. What
great,
do
and
I
you need to do
do?
that. But I go to Lyme Bytes, and I'm like, "Oh, you always pick up a pearl, even if you're the one of the headliner or you've been speaking there forever because you do this all day." I still learn stuff in pretty much every lecture that helps me think about things differently. And it's, sometimes it's maybe something I didn't know about, or other times it's just somebody else's perspective and hearing that in a way that's focused on the practical application of the knowledge, right? And so that's what's always been really great for me. So I'm excited. So I will be making sure that we post everything in the show notes, but
Thank
um,
you.
yeah,
And I think it's important too, like, so our speakers, there's a handful of MDs, a handful of DOs, and a handful of NDs. So like there's a really good array of backgrounds, that are coming together.
right.
And this year we've expanded beyond just Lyme and vector-borne diseases. We're looking at long COVID, we're looking at pandas, we're looking at mycotoxin illness, and
Yeah.
how those three things really intersect with Lyme and other vector-borne diseases.
Which is what we see in clinical practice. And it really is that community where we come together and support each other. I think that's why so many practitioners go in person, is like, otherwise you're isolated. Even if you're seeing patients all day in person versus virtual, you need that camaraderie and that connection. And that's what we do in our Lyme disease training program. Is like, so many of the people are like, the number one thing they love, aside from the direct mentorship and having, is that you have a community to support you that not only is answering questions when you have a hard case, but it brings us together so we support each other just like we're real people. you
Right.
know we have families and lives, and there's stress involved in what we do. We've chosen to help everyone. So yeah, we'll definitely, I think everybody should check it out. It's like so much fun. We're going to be in the beach this year in Florida, which will be awesome. So I'll make sure I get all the information. We'll put it in the show notes and all that good love. So as we wrap up, Myriah, I mean, I always like to say, like, is there any kind of thing that you feel like you just want to leave people with? Like, I mean, you've had this, your kids had this, I've had Lyme Babesia for like forever. And, took me a while to get better, but now I've been like 13 plus years without a symptom. And I know that, your health is incredible too. So it's like, we know a lot of people are saying we're not going to get better and it's all this terrible thing, but I'm like, but you can get better. And we've proven it over and over with our families, ourselves, and our patients. So I
Right.
always like to just give you an opportunity as we close to kind of like share, any kind of words of wisdom or words of hope with folks, kind of giving you the last word.
Well, all right. Thank you. You know how I love the last word, Tom. No, I mean, I would say that, and it's going to start out kind of sounding doomy and gloomy, but I promise you it'll end with hope. So, we're all bombarded with these toxins. We're all bombarded with these infections. We have things coming at us literally every second of every day. But we also have the ability to make ourselves as healthy as possible. We have the ability to choose what we put on our body, what we put in our body. We can literally modulate the amount of inflammation and immune dysfunction that would potentially prime someone to
Mm-hmm.
have a really bad outcome should one of these infections come into the body and start growing out of control. Or we have the ability to decrease the likelihood that we would have a really bad outcome. And a lot of it comes back to mindset. So your mindset matters more than you know. And if you think you're going to stay sick and you're never going to get well, that is probably true. And
Mm-hmm.
the amount of negative consequences that negative thinking, negative self talk, all of this negative bombardment from the media and toxic people in our lives, it can literally get your nervous system stuck, for lack of a better word, in a state that doesn't allow you to heal. So, I guess my very long winded and sounds kind of negative point is that you actually have control. You have control over your body, you have control over your health. And just don't lose hope. Try to stay positive and find somebody to work with that resonates with you, that you
Mm-hmm.
feel in your gut is your right partner on this journey to healing, because you can get healthy again, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't.
Such great words of wisdom. I mean, it's like that frequency of what you're thinking. And so many people, again, going back to like my comment on brain detoxification and sleep, and instead of supplements, and both have their place, but sleep first, is like what everybody seems to talk about diet as to what you put in your mouth. But I'm like, but what about what you put in here and what you put in here, what you put in your mind and you put in your heart? So like you said, the toxic social media and that, I mean, I just think that when I hear you share that, I get inspired because I have control over things. And yes, it might be hard, right? Life is not always easy, nor should it be, because actually, the way the body functions is if you stress it a little bit and then you rest and you stress a little more, that's how you actually grow. If you don't stress it at all and it's easy all the time, you actually fall apart and die
Right.
sooner. So, I mean, superb words of wisdom. I don't think any of that's negative. It's one of the things we started talking about even before we hit record was the kind of the truth bomb of like, hey, there is a little bit of tough love here because we're actually telling you how the body really works. And when I was like, poking fun at the conventional system a little bit, most people in the conventional system are not telling you how to live a healthy life. They're telling you how to deal with the disease process by making it long and drawn out and last as long as possible so Big Pharma makes as much money as possible. A lot of times people in those fields have good intentions, but it's like we also have to look at this mindset piece that Myriah just pointed out. So I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to kind of talk about that, and that you're always so open to just talking you the truth, in a loving way. But sometimes it's like, man, when people tell me the truth and then I take action and it works, I'm like, oh, So rather than hearing what I wanted to hear, I heard what I needed to hear. And then I kind of took action on that, even though I had to swallow a little bit of the Tom ego pill for a minute. Now I'm better,
Wow.
as opposed to the opposite. So, I mean, just brilliant words.
Thank you. Yeah,
You're
and
welcome.
getting back to basics, which is what you keep going back to, right?
Yeah.
Sleep, sleep,
Sleep,
detoxing.
hydration, get up in the morning and move your body. Number one way to detoxify the body, move, because your arms and legs need you to muscle contractions, and your lungs and your belly and your pelvis need pressure gradient changes. Guess what? When you move your body, you raise your heart rate a little bit, you breathe a little deeper. There you go. And lo and behold, once you do that, you get more tired and then you can go to sleep better.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science, but you need a coach who's willing to tell you the truth,
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, Dr. Myriah Hinchey, thank you so much for joining me. We'll have to do this again and dive even deeper into some of the things we just barely touched on, but just such a fantastic conversation. And I'm really glad that you're doing all the things you're doing and helping everybody. And until next time, I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us for this episode of the Lyme Insider. Stay tuned for more information on how to not only the nuts and bolts of healing, but really real healing and how to get there. So thanks for joining us. Until next time, this is Dr. Tom. Lots of love.
Bye. Thanks.